future for Overwatch, possibilities, opportunities. There is a reputation, vision for what the game ought to be. Things we can do to the core game, grow it, give people hints, reintroduce Overwatch, the PvP shooter.
We're all playing the beta for Overwatch 3 right now, and I'm here for it.
Yes.
The Overwatch 2 branding needs to die, and by the end of 2025, it will be so. That's my bet. That's my bet. I know I'm going to regret it. Let's do it. So let's get into it. I'm going to lay out my case for why I think we'll be moving on from this version of Overwatch 2 shortly. Whether it's 3, a relaunch of 2, or just plain old Overwatch, I don't know. But right now, Team 4 is deciding exactly what it will be from a gameplay perspective, and we're testing it for them. First things first, this video isn't a hit piece and neither supports nor refutes the current state of the game. Rather, it's meant to cut through that noise and show what's really going on. You see, people in the general debate get lost in the details. 5v5 or 6v6, preseason 9 buffs or posts, sustain versus mobility, skill expression, counterpicking, and so on. But it's all obtuse, it's all missing the point. Instead, what I want you to focus on is this: Overwatch is changing dramatically live right under our noses, changing with such magnitude so as to be justification for whatever's next. Ask yourself this: how many times has Team 4 decided on a totally new direction for the game and not told us outright, or often even truthfully? So while it's important to listen to what they're saying, it's more important to listen to how they're saying it. And what are they saying?
And make it, more of that game that all of our players want to play.
We do want to make the game, we keep saying it, we want to make the game that players want to play.
Hold that thought.
I have no idea what is going on.
As I'll show you, with a quantity and scope of changes along with various business realities, I'm convinced we're all essentially playing the beta for Overwatch 3 right now. You may disagree, and that's fine, but to that I'd say you're the frog in the boiling pot of water. You need to look beyond the last patch or two, the last few changes, to see just how radically Team 4 has managed the game these last 9 to 12 months. To think this is all just for fun is really missing the point. To me, it says Overwatch 2 as is isn't meeting their expectations or needs, or maybe just their future needs. Regardless, would Team 4 go to these lengths to fix something they felt wasn't broken? The matchmaker says hi. Following me so far, let's put a bow on all this. A few minutes ago, I said it's important to sort of look beyond what Team 4 says and instead focus on how they're saying it. And I mentioned this quote by Aaron.
And make it, more of that game that all of our players want to play.
Now step back. How do you hear that? Is that a game director exuding confidence in his vision of the game, saying everything's good as is and we're rolling with it? Or rather one soliciting feedback from the community, a game director sort of saying, we can make the game whatever it needs to be, guys, just help us figure out what that is? Personally, I think it's firmly the latter. And before anyone thinks I'm dissing Aaron, not at all, I actually really like him, but Overwatch is in a precarious position. It's weird. Can anyone say definitively what the winning formula is here? What's best for the franchise? No, not least of which is Team 4. I could argue more than any AAA live service game, Overwatch 2 has the most disparate of players. Everything from uber casuals to the most hardcore esport players. So different you can't compare or find middle ground among them. Or can you? So right now, you're probably curious but not convinced. That's fair. Let me point out 10 things that'll make you say, he might be onto something. 10 things that say to me that to regain some of its former glory, the Overwatch 2 branding needs to die. And it's going to sooner than you think. All right, in no particular order, Here are 10 things that'll make you raise an eyebrow. Number 1, the obvious, experiments. In the last 9 months, we've had Quicker Play, Double Trouble, Pickable Passives, Junks Lab, and Limit 2. And coming soon, 6v6 Roll Queue, Kingmaker, and Min 2 Max 3. Not to mention all the temporary arcade modes that are pseudo-experiments of their own, like the Community Crafted mode. I'll even throw Classic in there. Historically, we get just like 1 or 2 experiments a year, but recently we've had 9 in 9 months. Can you think of any AAA game that's tested such dramatic changes to its core gameplay as often, or even at all? I'll give you a minute. Number 2, balance changes. In the last 9 months, we've had more patches and individual changes than any previous period, just about combined. I count 564 distinct items, not including health pool changes, and that's only hero changes. And more eye-popping than the number are the changes themselves. Fundamental changes to the core gameplay. Raid boss tanks, hit point buffs, projectile buffs, big passive changes, armor changes, and so on. And still, despite all that, Team 4 is storming ahead with testing new formats. My opinion, they're both fine-tuning 5v5 and testing 6v6 because both will be in game, but my point stands. It's curious.
Yes!
Number 3, reputation. The Overwatch 2 branding is toxic. Its reputation, right or wrong, has been solidified. There's no amount of repair that can make players disassociate from that drama. For many, Overwatch 2 will always, I mean always, be something bad, even if it isn't. It's not like No Man's Sky where it was just a broken game that got fixed. Overwatch straight up broke promises at least, or lied and misled at worst. And players don't forget stuff like that. And this reputation bleeds over into social media where that messaging is amplified and repeated ad nauseum, potentially changing the hearts and minds of every single player and potential players. Number 4, player attrition. The thing about free-to-play games, respectable player counts are easy to come by, but it's player attrition that really tells the health of that free-to-play game. How sticky is it?
It feels like it's pretty sticky.
Because while there are billions of potential gamers on the planet, it's not good when you're churning through, like 1 million of them a month. Millions of gamers who log in once or twice, count as an MAU, and never come back. That deficit adds up very quick, especially when compared against the real total addressable market for a given genre, and even more so for free-to-play live service games where 1 or 2 entrants typically dominate and own like 95% of it. That being said, have you ever noticed Team 4 talks about player counts, but it's always done in a since day one X players have played kind of way with no context? Curious, no? Overwatch may have a decent player count, but much of it is probably new month to month. Much of it is casual, non-committal, non-profitable. But what makes a game sticky? Emotional investment, first and foremost, of which Overwatch 2 has no vehicles for anymore.
Reinhardt, live with honor.
But a close second is the quality or style of its gameplay. The question is it fun enough for a critical mass of players so as to be their sole motivation for committing to the game, for sticking around long term? Well, if Team 4 is looking to change that gameplay style or at least offer alternatives, it certainly would appear the answer to that is no, or at least not as fun as they think it can be. That as is can't retain that critical mass of players. Number 5, Activision Blizzard King accounts for like half of Xbox revenue. That outsized reliance on its money, along with the $70 billion price tag, means Xbox leadership is probably looking to them saying, what do you need to give us more? So considering that, I'd ask, is it really that far-fetched to think Xbox or even Activision is thinking, what's next? How do we grow the franchise? I think not. Companies pour resources into the products that make them money. That's just how it works. Number 6, Overwatch has actual competition now. Let's talk Marvel Rivals first. It's a team-based shooter, it's 6v6, and it's a Marvel product. Earlier I mentioned emotional investment is the #1 way to get players into your game long-term. Well, I'd ask, is there any property more valuable than Marvel or DC in that area? Billions of kids around the world grew up the last 10 to 15 years watching nothing but Marvel movies. And while Overwatch has, up until now, been unrivaled in terms of creating an emotional connection to its characters, I'd say Marvel is certainly a property that can beat them. And second, Deadlock, a 6v6 team-based shooter made by Valve. enough said, right? But consider this, the orange box. Long ago, Valve sold both Half-Life 2 and Team Fortress 2 as a single boxed game, and the success of each fed into the other. And you know what? It's about to happen again, I believe. Half-Life 2, Episode 3, and Deadlock will be shipped together as a single purchase, and it will dominate the landscape for a few months at least. Now, I personally don't think either of these games kills Overwatch, but if you don't think they can steal some players away, you're crazy. However, a relaunch of Overwatch or a new game entirely could help elevate the brand into that same top-of-mind place for gamers, and perhaps even overshadow its competition, much like it did to Battleborn. Number 7, the 5v5 versus 6v6 debate is tearing the community apart. Until or unless 6v6 returns, there will always be a very vocal community referencing it as the problem with Overwatch, and vice versa, I might add. I think Team 4 knows the only way to put this debate to rest is to provide both, and doing so will be close to justification enough alone to move beyond the Overwatch 2 branding. Number 8, on that same note, 5v5 has very legitimate issues, as does 6v6, but I'd argue of the two formats, 5v5 is in a tougher situation simply because Blizz can only do so much with just one tank. That format and Overwatch 2 are associated so strongly, I think one of those two things has to disappear to make any real progress on the matter, and I don't see 5v5 going away, so the obvious answer is to just kill the Overwatch 2 branding. Number 9, free-to-play live services in general are not the be-all end-all universal profit machines companies thought they were just 5 years ago. In fact, I can make a case Overwatch 2 was late to that party and the tide had already turned. Are they making more money than if it was a boxed game? Almost certainly, but in a field where Fortnite and Call of Duty own 90% of the market soundly, just how much more revenue Overwatch makes remains to be seen. And is that extra money enough to justify the reputational hit being a free-to-play live service game incurs? I personally don't see him moving away from the model entirely, but maybe some changes, some softening here will help him make that money without incurring such extreme reputational consequences. And a sizable change to the monetization in Overwatch 2 proper would just be an admission of defeat, of greed. So again, this is best done in whatever's next for the franchise. Number 10, last but definitely not least, Overwatch has a tremendous amount of untapped potential. I just can't believe Xbox leadership looks at Overwatch 1 and 2 and asks, how can we combine those? How can we make it a cultural icon again like it was in 1, while also making mountains of money like it does in 2? From the outside, it sure seems like a relatively safe bet. Much of the work is done. The pieces are there in some form or fashion. It's just more a matter of deciding what pieces to keep and how to put them together. And they can do so all while still earning revenue from Overwatch 2. But trying to climb that mountain to reach those heights again under the Overwatch 2 moniker is just handicapping themselves. So, I've made my case, one I feel is grounded in reason and sound business principles. But if you're still not convinced, let me drive the dagger in.
4 or 5% of the population in 6v6 at the end of this thing, it's not really, or 10% of the population, let's say, it's not really as big of a win for us. But if that 10% of our players are all players that have come back and the game has just grown, that's actually a pretty amazing thing for us.
If just 10% of Overwatch 1 players return, that's a big win. Think about that for a second. That's huge and curious. Why is he even thinking about that? Why is it important? You know what I mean? Is it even possible without reverting the changes that made him leave in the first place? What's it say about Overwatch 2 in general? And most revealing, why is he even discussing it publicly? I can tell you it's no accident. I'm not talking crazy here. Overwatch is decent, but could be a lot more and likely needs to be more. And I think they've realized this current version of the game isn't going to get them there. Look, I know I've spoken hyperbole to a degree in this video and I'll probably be proven dead wrong a year from now. But where there's smoke, there's fire. You know, does Overwatch 2 need to die? No, of course not. It could do just fine as is for years to come. But I think we can all agree as is isn't exactly a front runner. And just how long is that years to come? 2, 3? In business terms, 2 or 3 years is essentially tomorrow when you consider how long it takes to bring a new product to market. On the other hand, I think the Overwatch 2 branding should die. It does more harm than good, and there are various business realities that make it worth discussing, and Aaron's sure acting like they see reason for major change as well. I mean, he flat out says they want to make the game players want to play. So, we'll see, but I'll say this. Do you remember how miserable we all were at the end of Overwatch 1, the multi-year content drought? And do you remember how quickly it was all forgotten the moment you logged into Overwatch 2? That's what Overwatch needs again, and to get that is going to take more than just adding 6v6. And with that, I'm done. Appreciate you taking the time. Take care of one another, and I will see you soon.
You got any stories, friend?
Yeah, suppose I do. You want to know the saddest thing I ever saw? When I was a boy, my brother and I wanted a dog. So our father took in an old greyhound. Never seen a greyhound, have you? No.
Seen a few showdowns in my day.
A greyhound is a racing dog. Spends its life running in circles, chasing a bit of felt, made up like a rabbit. One day we took it to the park. Our dad had warned us how fast that dog was, but we couldn't resist. So my brother took off the leash, and in that instant, the dog spotted a cat. Imagine it must have looked just like that piece of felt. He ran. Never saw a thing as beautiful as that old dog running. Until at last he finally caught it. And to the horror of everyone, he killed that little cat, tore it to pieces. Then he just sat there, confused. That dog had spent its whole life trying to catch that thing. Now it had no idea what to do.